Yes, welcome into the camp. We are here to talk about day one of actual football. Jesse, we were down at Platteville this morning. The Badgers were on the field for more than 2 hours, and they weren't in pads. They were only in spiders. We didn't get to see like any actual hitting. We didn't get to see the actual live hitting that Luke Fickell promised us last week, but that'll be coming. That'll be coming soon. We did get a few big hits that I don't think everyone was overly happy with. We'll talk about a couple of those instances as well. But I think I wanted to start just overall. Are you glad to be back?
Sure. We spend our whole lives talking about football, and we only get to see it a handful of days out of the year. So it's a lot of driving to and from Platteville, but certainly glad, especially on day one, when you want to get a sense of what's going on with this team after the offseason.
Yep, for sure. So we did get a chance to watch practice, and I just wanted to we'll give our standouts of the day here in a little bit, but each day as we go through this, we're going to be doing this every day as we get back from practice. I wanted to just give an overarching view of what exactly happened in practice. What were the biggest themes of the practice? And I think we would both agree, and Luke Fickell maybe would agree as well, that ball security was a bit of an issue for Wisconsin's offense. You broke down the stats, and I know you'll have your practice article breaking down everything that happened at practice up on The Athletic. Probably as people are listening to this, they can go and read your stuff up at The Athletic. But I think that's one of the bigger points is Wisconsin's offense unable to hold on to the ball, while at the same time, the defense being able to knock some balls loose. Two things that didn't necessarily happen a ton last year. Wisconsin did not force a ton of fumbles and unfortunately put the ball on the ground maybe too many times for Luke Fickell's wanting last year.
Yeah, one of the things that Luke talked about in his session with reporters after practice, and he said is really the overarching message, was discipline in a lot of different areas, but certainly being able to take care of the football is one of them. And we talk all the time, Zach, when we have a chance to watch spring and fall practices, that sometimes it's hard to discern what does this all mean, because if the defense makes a great play, well, that's great for the defense, but does that mean that the offense isn't very good? So we had some of that today. By my unofficial count, and I'll stress that it's unofficial, I had 6 fumbles by the offense today, 2 of which occurred right away in skeleton drills. And some of that certainly is the defense making plays. In both those instances, you had safeties coming over. I think it was Kamoi Latu and Hunter Wooler both causing fumbles and then recovering them. You had a couple fumbles that were at critical moments in 11-on-11 play. But it's good for the defense because Luke talked about this afterward. The defense only forced 4 fumbles all of last season, and the offense, to their detriment, lost 12 fumbles. So yes, ball security has to be critical. And just because it happens on day one doesn't mean it's going to happen on August 30th against Western Michigan or later in the season, but you want to set the tone here on day one. And the offense, it's fair to say, was not as crisp as the group would have wanted.
Yeah, for those listening or for those watching this, I actually caught the 2 fumbles during skeleton. We're only able to video maybe the first half an hour of practice, and a couple of those plays did happen during that period of time. So you can see that video up on our YouTube page, and it's relatively early in the video. So yeah, I mean, first of all, Kamoi Latu was just hammering away at that ball, man. I mean, it was a skeleton, like it's a skeleton drill. They're not in full pads. He's essentially just holding up a guy and just slamming at the ball. The other one was from Hunter Wooler, was really, really good on, was it Chris Brooks Jr. that put the ball on the ground? It just came over, snapped it as he was running by and fell on it. So those are 2 playmakers. And we talked a lot in the offseason, didn't we, about Hunter Wooler being in position to make plays. That was his mindset. He wanted to be a playmaker and be in position to do that stuff. And again, it's day one. It's not in pads. It's not in a full contact drill. It's nothing like that, but it's a good start for him. You would certainly say when it comes to the idea of, constantly being around the ball and be able to take it away from the other team, which again was not something that happened too often last year in terms of the fumbles. So that was obviously a big part of this. And do you think Luke Fickell kind of has to go, I love this, but I hate this? That was kind of his message, wasn't it? It was like, I love to see this, but I hate to see this. That's the problem with both spring ball and fall camp.
Right. That's the challenge for him as the head coach, is deciding what it all means. And in the end, he said, which is probably the best thing he can say, is that this is good for the team. It obviously creates competition. I think this defense, based on what we saw in the spring, but day one and probably what we'll see moving forward, they definitely appear in position to be much better as playmakers than what we saw last year. And I know it's only coming against Wisconsin's own offense, but when we're talking about all these plays, it's coming from a bunch of different guys. I know we'll get into more specifics, but when it comes to these fumbles, Leon Lowry forced a fumble. Christian Allegro forced a fumble. We talked about Kamoi Latu and Hunter Wohler. Justin Taylor was in there on one. So you've got a variety of guys who have shown playmaking ability. And the fact that it's coming from, you got inside linebackers, outside linebackers, safeties. It's good news for the defense. It's just that you'd like to be able to hold on to the ball and give yourself a better opportunity as an offense.
Yeah, I'm not going to – I think if we're being fair, and I think if the offense is being fair and how they were describing how things went today, they probably wouldn't say they went great. But the defense certainly played a role in that. And I think when we saw it in spring, and I think we continue to see it now, the team's speed on defense is vastly, vastly improved, especially on the edges. I mean, Leon Lowry and John Pius to go along with Darrell Peterson and a healthy Aaron Witt. And then also, obviously, what they could potentially get from a Thomas Heiberger as well. They're just so much more athletic on the edges, but they're also more athletic up the middle too with Jaheim
Thomas.
Thank you, Jaheim Thomas, and Taka Curtis, and then obviously Jake Chaney, and you also can throw Allegro in there. They're just it's a much faster defense, and I certainly think it gave Wisconsin's offense some problems today. But it's day one. And I think I'm probably going to say that about a million times as we go through this today. It is day one. It's one practice, and it's not going to decide anything one way or the other. But I think the team speed. And maybe you'll disagree, but I think it certainly stood out.
No, I definitely agree. That when I was talking to Hunter Wohler down at Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis, that's one of the first things that he mentioned. And certainly he would know. He's been a part of a number of defenses, but especially at the linebacker spots. That's why they went to the transfer portal and did what they did, and basically putting a new face on both those positions. And I think you're going to see that pay dividends if you're a Badgers fan this season. I don't know whether it'll be 4 sacks a game from certain guys. We've certainly seen them get after it and get into the backfield during practices, but that was paramount. We saw that last season, just guys not being in the best position, and it hurt this team.
It definitely did. It definitely did. So the one thing we were talking about that we were interested in seeing, I took it out of the equation yesterday because we'd already talked about it, but it is the quarterbacks, right? And it is the quarterback battle. They continue to split reps. And I don't know that either one stood out today. If you would agree, again, I don't know that they really took a ton of shots down the field, which is kind of maybe where we're expecting to see the two separate. But I don't know that the offense in general, but especially the quarterbacks, really stood out in a ton of ways today.
Yeah, neither Tyler Van Dyke nor Braden Locke had their best day. I think Van Dyke showed more of the plays that make you go, oh, okay, that's why they brought him here. That's why I think in the end he will be the starter. But that's not saying a ton, because you're exactly right, Zach. There were no huge plays, that wow moments where you go, oh, he took a shot 40 yards down the field and they just had a big first down or a big touchdown or anything like that. But the few plays that come to mind with Van Dyke are just things that show he's grasping the offense and some of the skill set that he provides. I think one play in particular was, and there's a play where he kept the ball. It was, Tawee Walker and Darrell Peterson was crashing down, and Van Dyke made the right read and was able to keep it and complete a short pass to Will Pauling. And then there was one where Van Dyke got free. The play broke down. We've talked about this before, and so is Luke, that's one thing that he can provide. It's not like he's going to have those Tanner Mordecai 8 runs a game or something like that, but he can open it up for you and get a first down, get some chunk yardage. And then to me, I think the best throw of the day was, and it wasn't a big throw, but it was a first down throw over the middle where he showed that arm strength. It's really, of the two, he's got the superior arm, and Phil Longo admitted that on Monday as well, though they both possess different skill sets. And it was a first down with a defensive back draped all over the wide receiver. And so it's not a ton of plays, but it was just enough that make you go, that's what you like about it. But there's plenty from both guys that they need to work on. I mean, Locke was almost intercepted. And then the sequence, and I led with my practice story on this, is Tyler Van Dyke was working with the second team offense and they were running a hurry up sequence. And they took so long to get the play in and they weren't even close to snapping the ball. And Luke had it and just kicked him off the field and put a new group in there. So, and that goes back to the urgency and the discipline that you need. But both guys have a lot to work on. I still do think, though, in the end, it'll be Van Dyke.
Yeah, and Luke, again, was asked about that afterwards and said as much. You're going to have to hold it to a standard, and that ain't it. That play that you mentioned where he threaded it over the middle, I still don't know how it got through there. Like I don't know if it was the inside linebacker was right there. Max Lofi was all over Will Pauling, and it still managed to get in there. Will caught it for the first down. You're right. When you talk about best throws of the day or most impressive throws of the day, most wow throws of the day, that was probably up there. The other thing that we kind of talked about leading into this was some of the guys that we hadn't seen before, the guys that came in over the summer that we didn't get to see in spring ball. So a Joseph Griffin or a Brandon Lane, some of those guys. And I think both of them kind of had, not big plays by any stretch, but kind of stood out. Joseph Griffin had a great catch on the sideline on a ball that, a guy that's 5'10", maybe ain't catching it, but he's 6'2" or 6'3" or 6'4", however they want to list him on the roster. And they put the ball right over the corner, and he was able to go up and get it. It was a nice grab. And Brandon Layden is a big body, man, and he can move. And I think both of those guys are Joseph Griffin's, if we're being fair about this, and it's one practice, his first practice, is pretty far down the depth chart right now, right? Like he was working with the threes. Brandon Lane at least got some time with the twos.
Yeah, of those two guys, Brandon Lane certainly looks like he's ready right now to be at minimum a rotational piece and maybe even more than that. And there's a couple plays that stand out. You're not necessarily going to see your defensive linemen get the big sack plays frequently like John Pius, Gerald Peterson, Leon Lowry, those guys. But he had a couple plays where he stuffed a run right up the middle for either a short gain or a loss. One went to Jackson Aker, one went to Cade Yakimelli. And just the fact that he's out there getting those consistent 2 reps and you're starting to see his name making plays on day one is important. It was the top group was as expected. You had Kurt Neal and James Thompson Jr., but then you had Cade McDonald and Brandon Lane and a number of other guys also. Elijah Hills was in there. Ben Barton was in there. But I think this is why they went and got Lane. They needed help. They needed not just a body that you can throw in there, but someone who can be an impact type of guy. And Luke was asked about him afterward and said he really likes that he is a bigger bodied guy. He likes those guys who have been through, even if it's a different college program, it means they've had experiences, they've had tough experiences. And so hopefully for Wisconsin, that will pay off.
And then also it was the true freshman that we didn't get to see in the spring. And the two ones that we were, I think throughout this entire offseason, we're interested to see were the two running backs, Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree. And, they have 9 running backs in that room now. And you can make the argument that they're 8 and 9 right now on day one, just based on some of the stuff. And again, I know we're not going to, it's stupid. I shouldn't even say that. It's a rotation. They are continually, they're getting some opportunities here and there, but physically they both look the part. They're both over 200 pounds. And when you see them with the ball in their hands, and, Braden Locke kind of said this yesterday, it just looks natural. It just looks right. And I think especially, and this was kind of something that we saw in the film with Darian Dupree catching the ball in the backfield. He had a really nice catch over the middle in skeleton drills from, I think it was Braden Locke that hit him right in stride. And those are, you don't necessarily expect freshman running backs to be running routes like that and being as smooth as that. And he was.
There were not a lot of opportunities for those guys, understandably so, on day one. But Dupree is one where when he touches the ball, I went, oh, wow, that could be special. And you're right. The first touch that he had, yes, it's skeleton drills. And of course, that means there's no lineman. The quarterback has no pressure on him. He can see whatever he needs to see. But Dupree caught a long pass on his first touch from Locke. And he also had another catch that I thought was pretty solid up the left sideline. Justin Taylor went for an interception and missed it. And so Dupree caught the pass. And then there's another play where Dupree, and this is against the threes, so take that for what it's worth. But I thought he had a really nice gain where he showed some speed around the left edge. This is when it can be tough to discern, was it a 2-yard run? Was it stopped at the line of scrimmage, or would it have been a first down because there was a defender in the area? But you just see Dupree with the ball, and it feels so natural. And I'm sure you could say the same thing about Jones. Again, there weren't a ton of touches. Those guys have a bit of a mountain to climb here early on. I certainly think Ches Malusi and Tawee Walker are going to open the season as the 1-2 guys. Like, I don't envision them dropping off to the point that a freshman is going to overtake them.
No.
But maybe there's room for a number 3, but they're still going to have to surpass Jackson Aker. He's got a lot of experience in Cade Yakimelli. So it might not happen this season, but there is a lot to like about those guys. And beyond that, of the 11 scholarship freshmen who were here participating in their first practice, you didn't see a ton. Dylan Johnson got one stuff in his opportunity with the threes, but it's to be expected early on that you don't see a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the young guys, Xavier Lucas is a guy that, Ricardo Hallman said, I can't believe we talked about this yesterday. Can't believe they let him get out of Florida. And physically, he looks the part. And he is a guy that has an amazing number. And he also is going to be a guy that has to, pass a lot of guys to be able to get on the field early. Now, again, I'm not saying that's impossible. Think about the guys that are in front of him right now. They're all young and they haven't played, right? Jonas DeClona and Jace Arnold and Amari Snowden. So these guys that are on the outside, they haven't played snaps. So it's not like he's behind in that. So I think that there are a couple of guys that you could sit there and say, I think that they may have a chance to play early because the guys in front of them don't have experience, or it's because of a need. And defensive line is obviously would be that need. And there was another play by a young guy, Jamel Howard, getting up and knocking a pass down. Did he have 2 of them?
Yeah, he had 2 batted balls at the line of scrimmage on Mabry Matire with the 3. So it's impressive.
Yeah, it's not something that we're going to talk about on a probably a week-to-week basis when it comes to the season, but maybe this starts to give them some of the confidence that they need, because defensive line is a spot that they need people to step up and to fill voids. Because Luke Fickell said at media days last week, I was talking about the quarterback competition and some of the other things that are happening, and the defensive line was the one that really got his eyes wide open and got him talking, because he knows how important it is, but also just because there's, what can you count on there right now? James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal and Ben Barton to an extent, but then it's guys that haven't played a ton of football, right? Like Cade McDonald he's an older guy, but he hasn't played a ton. And then it's the transfers, Elijah Hills and Brandon Lane, and could it be Jamel Howard?
Yeah,
perhaps. We'll see. What were were there any other big talking points that stood out for you?
No, on day one, I'm largely looking for who's running with the 1s, who's running with the 2s, what do the rotations look like, and who are some of the individual standouts. So that's maybe less a big picture and more into specifics, but that's what we're here to talk about.
All right, switching gears here. Let's talk about some of these standouts from day one. I think you could make an argument that there were more obviously standouts on defense just because of the success that they had in getting the ball free, right, from the offense. But I want to start with Tucker Ashcraft, a guy who didn't play a ton in the spring. He was coming off an off season where he was limited with an injury. But he had a couple of really nice plays, and it felt like he was kind of not a security blanket by any stretch, but was a target more often than not with a couple of those, with both Braden Locke and with Tyler Van Dyke. Outside of a late fumble, which obviously Luke Fickell brought up when we talked with him after the practice, I thought he, among the pass catchers, was probably the most notable.
Yeah, he was the focal point of the offense. He was one of the most consistent guys and caught multiple passes. There were a couple that went for first downs from Tyler Van Dyke. I think one was up the left hash, one was over the middle, a couple other balls that he caught. You mentioned the fumble. There were enough to go around, but like a lot about his game, and it certainly feels like if you're looking at who's going to be the biggest playmaker at tight end this season, more and more it feels like it's going to be him. And Luke certainly mentioned Riley Nowakowski, and he's going to have a role, and he can do a little bit of everything. But Luke likes the versatility that Ashcraft has. He said that's basically what they're looking for out of that position. He can block, he can catch, he can do whatever you need. And so it's a good sign for Wisconsin. Ashcraft obviously was thrown into the fire a year ago at a time when no one expected it. In fact, on this day a year ago, the first day of fall camp, one of our big talking points was, hey, remember those 3 tight ends who were supposed to be on the roster? They're not. What is Wisconsin going to do? And they just didn't have a ton from a playmaking standpoint. But I think they'll have more this year in Ashcraft.
I would agree. We'll get to maybe some more of the offensive standouts after we get through a couple of these defensive guys. Kamali Latu is a guy that we mentioned that had the forced fumble in the skeleton drills. The reason I have him here, it's not like he made a bunch of big plays, but he is just he's a different dude on the field than a lot of what they have in terms of just the attitude that he plays with. You know, he's on the field when he's on the field, whether that is coming up and thudding when maybe he shouldn't be thudding, when he's talking, he's yelling after a play, like celebrating, like, he's on the field. He brings the juice that a lot of people always talk about, like BYOJ, bring your own juice. What year was that they were talking about that? That was
a Colin Wilder year, was it not?
It may have been. Yeah, it might have been 2019. So, yeah, I mean, or not 2019. What year was it? 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they all blend together.
They do, especially of late. But yeah, BYOJ, he is the epitome of that.
What I think is interesting about the secondary right now is they have enough talent that there are situations where Latu's not on the field with the top group. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to get 1 snaps. But for example, when a lot of the snaps that they had today, so the safeties were Austin Brown and Hunter Wohler, because you had Max Lofi in the slot and obviously Nazir Forkurine and Ricardo Holman on the outside. And then there were situations where when they put Brown in the slot, Lofi came off the field, and the safeties were Latu and Wohler. And there were situations where there was Latu and Brown at safety. So they have a number of options. Obviously, you're not going to see all those guys on the field on every snap, but it just goes to show you the kind of depth that they have on the back end that probably makes coaches feel pretty good about what they have.
Yeah, and we talked with Mike Tressel about that on Monday with just Max Lofi and Austin Brown and exactly who they or what their roles are going to be. And both of them were working with the safeties in the individual drills. I think, did you say that?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Which was something I noticed, down in the field while I was able to go around. It's interesting that both of them there. But that's kind of where the slot guys have been, though. Jason Maitre, I felt like worked with the corners in those individual drills last year. Either way, their top 3 slots right now would be Austin Brown or Max Lofi, then Austin Brown, and then Owen Arnett, and all of them currently working with the safeties. So either way, the other guy that stood out, and you could probably make a case for a number of the outside linebackers, but I went with John Pius, the transfer from William and Mary. He against the first team tackles was a problem. And again, you could say that about a lot of the offense, the outside linebackers, but he just stands out because of the physicality that he has and the size that he can bring. And just everything about his game is something that I can't wait to see come, a month from today. Like, it's just, I feel like he's just going to be a difference maker when you put the pads on. We see it without the pads. I feel like it's going to take a step up because he can be so physical and he does have the athletic ability.
This is really a continuation of what we saw in the spring and what people saw when he was an FCS All-American. I had him and this is tough because you don't know, was it a sack? Again, like, was the running back touched? But a couple sacks where he beat his guy off the edge and was just causing havoc in the backfield. And then Daryl Peterson had 1 or 2 potential sacks too. We mentioned Leon Lowry getting in the mix, causing a fumble. But when Mike Tressel is talking on Monday about the fact that he feels like this defense has more, as he called it, multiplicity up front and a better third down identity, well, John Pius has a lot to do with that, as do some of these other outside linebackers, because they can cause some problems off the edge, and they have been able to continue to do that. So there's certainly a lot to like about what they have there. And I think when we were looking at who was with the first team defense, It's more obvious on the defensive line. It's more obvious in the secondary. The linebacker positions are the ones where they really, especially on the outside, keep rotating, which is so fascinating because you'll see Pius with Lowry. You have Aaron Witt in there with Lowry. You have Daryl Peterson and Pius. You have all these different combinations, and any of them, quite honestly, could be used in a game. And I would expect all four of those guys to be key contributors in some way.
I would as well. I joked because there was a picture of Aaron Witt walking into the building on must have been Monday night when they got down to Platteville, and dude looked like a man on a mission, like just no smile, just an absolute mean mug of a face walking in there. And I mean, I could see it. I mean, he obviously has dealt with so many injuries in his career, and then he gets into a game late in the season. He obviously played at Minnesota, and he got to play in the bowl game, got to actually play some defense in the bowl game. And then in the spring, turn some heads, but then he gets hurt and misses, the last half of spring. But he was out there with the first team offense or first team defense to begin. So I think that they have. I said this a couple of years ago, and it didn't turn out to be the case. But they had like 5. I thought they had 5 starting outside linebackers. I think they have guys that are very interchangeable at this point with those 4. Witt, and maybe Witt's maybe a little bit better against the rush than maybe he is as a pass rusher, and the other guys maybe better pass rushers than they may be against the rush. But I think they have 4 guys that they can count on right now. And when they go into their sub packages and they can move Jaheim Thomas to the outside, he got a big smile on his face when we were talking to him yesterday about the chance, because like he goes, when I get on the edge and I get going, I don't know, I don't feel like I can be stopped. So there are a lot of different options that I think is very, very exciting for them.
I think there's a lot of reason for optimism defensively, and it stems from what they have at those linebacker positions. But you're right. You're more apt to see Peterson, Pius, Lowry in the backfield, and that may not be Witt's greatest attribute, though he certainly can, but he can be a contributor. I like what Thomas Heiberger brings as a true freshman too. So they've got some good talent in the pipeline too, with both he and Anilo Lafele. And even at inside linebacker, there's still rotations going on there. You mentioned Jaheim Thomas. Well, the first rep with the defense was Jaheim Thomas and Jake Chaney. But obviously, Tackett Curtis and Christian Allegro are going to factor into that too. They were running with the 2s, but Allegro got reps with the 1s. So tons of talent at those linebacker spots that gives Badgers fans reason for optimism this season.
Yeah, I feel like the one spot maybe we haven't talked a ton about is wide receiver. We got to see some of the one-on-ones. They did this last fall. They have this competitive period after they stretch. They do this little, hitting drill, and then they go into these competitive periods. And it was one-on-ones, and the offense won. And CJ Williams had a hell of a catch in the corner of the end zone, and I was in a perfect position for it. I was in a perfect. You got it for anybody that has seen the YouTube, or not the YouTube, the Badgers Twitter account. They posted the video. It's a great catch by CJ. I was in a perfect position to grab it. And because it is the preseason, or it's fall camp for all of us, the media is no different. It's day one for me too. Instead of zooming out to grab the picture and grab the great catch on video, I zoomed in. And so I got very little of that. Got the celebration afterwards. But either way, hell of a catch by CJ Williams. And I think we could say that about a lot of stuff. Quincy Burrows had a really nice grab in that too. And then there were some good defensive plays made by Max Lofi. I think it was on Trech Kekahuna, a breakup. So those are fun periods to watch because they are very, very competitive. And I wonder if they keep track of that, because I shouldn't even say I know they keep track of it. I'm just wondering if there's like a penalty after this. Like up at Packers training camp, if the offense wins or the defense wins on this last period, the other side has to do push-ups. I wonder if at some point in camp, do you have like something that one side has to do something more? I feel like there should be something like that. But I love those periods because they're just man on man and who's got it better.
If there's a way to create a competition, Luke will find it. So maybe they'll bring back the drum where they can bang on it, except they'll inevitably break it. So might have some repairs there. But yeah, with the wide receiver group, Vinny Anthony and Bryson Green certainly look like the top 2 guys on the outside. I think it's interesting with Trech because Will established himself last year, but Trech is going to get a ton of first team reps. sometimes in
It
place
did.
of Will. Yes, sometimes in place of Will, sometimes alongside Will. And so that feels like, you're going to see those four guys. And then the question is, well, who are the other guys on the outside? I think Quincy Burrows, certainly to me right now, feels like that next guy, and CJ Williams in the mix too. And after that, guys have work to do, especially the transfers. Tyrell Henry, who they brought in from Michigan State. You mentioned Joseph Griffin from Boston College. He'll certainly have a chance to work his way up. So that was one of the things that Luke mentioned down in Indy about trying to find some of those deep threats on the outside down the field. And we're still waiting to see more of that, but they have some options.
Yeah. We haven't talked about the offensive line very much because I don't think it's necessarily fair without pads being on to make any judgments. But we also have to determine, like, we know who this, we think we know who the starting five is going to be, but it is like the other story of camp is who's going to fill in behind, and how successful and how confident can they be in guys stepping in behind them, whether it's a young guy like Kevin Haywood still working with the second team at left tackle. We saw certain guys moving in different spots, but I mean, anything there for you stand out? I mean, I'm not going to judge the actual play, but in terms of like where guys are lining up.
Well, it's more who's with the second team group, because there's no
That's what I
surprise.
mean.
Yeah, there's no surprise with the first team. It's the same five that we saw in the spring. I fully expect those to be the top five throughout the season. Is more the right side of the second team unit. So the left side was, you mentioned Kevin Haywood. He was at left tackle. JP Benchwell was at left guard. Kerry Kadinko was at center. But now you have Colin Cubberly at right guard. And I think at the end of spring, they had him at right tackle, in part because they needed bodies. But AJ Blazik has said all along he viewed his long-term fit on the inside. And then right tackle, it's Barrett Nelson, a guy that we did not see in the spring because he was hurt. I know we talked about him the other day when I was mentioning some of the weight gains, and it felt like, well, this guy has a chance to maybe be your top reserve swing tackle. And Kevin Haywood's certainly going to have something to say about that. But I think Barrett Nelson is one of those guys that we haven't spent very much time talking about because he wasn't on the field, and he could be a part of a rotation moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. So Wisconsin will be back on the field tomorrow morning. We'll be there, and then we'll be back to talk about it afterwards. Again, you can find all of Jesse's coverage up on The Athletic. You can also find interviews and camp footage, video footage on our YouTube page. And then also going to try and start using our Instagram account a little bit more as well. Put some photos up there from this morning, so you can go and check that out, the Camp Podcast on Instagram. Jesse, day one in the books, day two coming up. Thank you very much.
We're back, baby. See you tomorrow, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.